When a struggling single dad finds a stray dog shivering by the roadside, he takes it in, forming an unexpected bond that fills a void in his challenging life. Little does he know, this resilient canine belongs to a reclusive billionaire heiress determined to escape the trappings of her privileged world. As the truth unfolds, their lives become inextricably linked, launching a journey filled with humorous misunderstandings, heartwarming discoveries, and a growing connection that challenges societal expectations. Together, they learn that true value and love are found in the most unexpected places. Rain pelts against cracked windshield glass as Marcus Bennett's weathered hands grip the steering wheel. His truck's headlights cut through darkness, illuminating a sodden bundle of fur trembling on the roadside. For a moment, the world narrows. The single father who's shouldered too many burdens sees himself in those frightened eyes. Without hesitation, he stops. As Marcus wraps his worn jacket around the shivering dog, neither could know this simple act of compassion would ripple across two vastly different worlds, his own hardscrabble existence and the gilded cage of heiress Eleanor Harrington, who stares out her penthouse window, searching for what she's lost, both literally and figuratively. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The East Side neighborhood of Pine Grove wasn't the kind of place that made it onto postcards. Neat but worn home-lined streets where American-made cars from the previous decade were parked in driveways. It was early November, and the morning frost had just begun to give way under weak sunlight as Marcus Bennett's alarm blared for the third time. "Dad, we're gonna be late again." 12-year-old Lily's voice carried through their modest three-bedroom ranch house, the one Marcus had fought to keep after Caroline passed 4 years ago. Breast cancer. Stage 4 by the time they found it. The medical bills still haunted his credit score. Marcus groaned, forcing himself upright. His shift at the auto body shop had run late last night. Mr. Grayson's classic Camaro needed to be ready for the weekend, and his back protested the 5 hours of sleep on the mattress that had seen better days. "A-coming, Lil," he called, his voice rough with sleep. The events of last night flooded back. The rain, the dog. Marcus turned to see a pile of blankets in the corner of his bedroom where he'd set up a makeshift bed. From beneath them, a pair of soulful brown eyes peered out cautiously. "Hey there," Marcus said softly. "I didn't dream you up after all." The dog, some kind of border collie mix by his guess, remained motionless except for its eyes, which tracked Marcus's every move. Its black and white coat was still dirty despite Marcus's attempts to dry it off last night, and it was thinner than it should be. "Dad," Lily's voice again, more urgent. "Give me 5 minutes," Marcus replied, quickly pulling on jeans and a flannel shirt. He looked back at the dog. "I'll figure you out later, buddy. Stay put." In the kitchen, Lily had already poured herself cereal and was halfway through eating it. Her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, school uniform slightly rumpled. She was the spitting image of Caroline. Same determined set to her jaw, same intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. "You look like you slept in your clothes," she observed critically. "Almost did." Marcus poured coffee into a travel mug and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. "Listen, Lil, I need to tell you something before school." Lily paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Are we moving again?" Her voice was suddenly small, and Marcus felt the familiar twist of guilt in his chest. "No, nothing like that. We've got a visitor. I found a dog last night in the rain. He was in bad shape, so I brought him home." Lily's eyes widened. "A dog? Where can I see him?" "He's in my room and he's pretty spooked. I'll take him to the vet today to see if he's microchipped. If not..." Marcus trailed off, knowing he couldn't afford another mouth to feed, but already feeling attached to those sad brown eyes. "If not, we keep him," Lily finished firmly, a spark of excitement lighting her face for the first time in months. The school drop-off line moved with agonizing slowness. Lily fidgeted in the passenger seat of the old Ford pickup, her backpack clutched to her chest. "Dad, promise you won't give him away while I'm at school." Marcus sighed. "Lil, if he belongs to someone—" "But what if no one claims him? We can keep him then, right? I'll help take care of him. I'll walk him every day, and I can use my birthday money from Grandma for dog food." Her words tumbled out in a rush of hope. Marcus recognized the look in his daughter's eyes. It was the same one Caroline had when she set her mind to something. "Let's see what the vet says first, okay? No promises." Lily's face fell slightly, but she nodded. As they reached the drop-off point, she leaned over to give him a quick hug. "Love you, Dad." "Love you too, Lil. Have a good day. Mrs. Rodriguez is picking you up for the study group, remember?" "I remember." She hopped out, joining the stream of uniformed children flowing into Pine Grove Academy. The scholarship that allowed Lily to attend was one of the few lucky breaks they'd had since Caroline's death. Marcus watched until she disappeared through the doors, then checked his watch. He had just enough time to drop the dog at the vet before his shift. He dialed the shop as he pulled away from the school. "Grayson's Auto, this is Tanya." "Hey, Tanya, it's Marcus. I need to come in an hour late today. Got an emergency." There was a pause on the other end. "Frank's not gonna like that. Wilkins' Mustang is coming in at 10. "I know. I'll make up the time tonight. It's important." Another pause. "Fine, but you owe me one." "Add it to my tab," Marcus replied with a wry smile. "Thanks, Tanya." By the time Marcus returned home, the dog had emerged from the blanket nest and was sitting alert in the middle of his bedroom, still wary, but no longer hiding. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, kneeling a few feet away. "Hungry?" He held out a piece of leftover chicken from the refrigerator. The dog's nose twitched, but it didn't move. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." Marcus placed the chicken on the floor and backed away. After a moment's hesitation, the dog crept forward and quickly snatched the chicken, retreating to a safe distance before gobbling it down. Marcus noticed it was limping slightly on its front right paw. "You've had a rough time, haven't you?" Marcus murmured. "Let's get you checked out." It took 20 minutes of gentle coaxing, but Marcus finally managed to get the dog into his truck. As they drove to Lakeside Veterinary Clinic, the dog pressed itself against the passenger door, as far from Marcus as possible. The radio played softly, classic rock, Caroline's favorite. Another ghost that refused to fade. Dr. Reynolds was a kind-faced woman in her 50s who'd treated the Bennett family's pets since before Lily was born. Their last dog, Max, had been put to sleep 2 years ago, another loss in the string of losses that had defined recent years. "Well, who do we have here?" Dr. Reynolds asked as Marcus led the reluctant dog into the examination room. "Found him by the road last night in the storm. No collar, pretty skittish." Dr. Reynolds nodded, approaching slowly with her hand extended. "Let's have a look at you, handsome." The examination revealed a male border collie mix, approximately 3 years old, malnourished but otherwise in decent health, apart from a mild sprain in his right front leg. No fleas, surprisingly clean teeth. "He's been someone's pet," Dr. Reynolds concluded, scanning for a microchip. The scanner beeped. "And he is chipped." Marcus felt a conflicting wave of relief and disappointment. "So, you can find the owners? Let me check the database." She typed the chip number into her computer, then frowned. "That's strange. It's registering, but the owner information is blocked. It's a privacy-protected registration." "What does that mean?" "Some wealthy owners do this for security reasons. The chip company will contact them on our behalf." She looked thoughtfully at the dog. "This is a high-end chip, actually, and despite being underweight, he's been well cared for, expensive dental work, signs of professional grooming before he went missing." Marcus glanced at the dog, who was watching them both with intelligent eyes. "So what happens now?" "I'll report. Him found. The company will notify the owners, who can then contact you directly or arrange pickup through a third party if they prefer to remain anonymous." Marcus nodded. an unexpected weight settling in his chest. And until then, he needs a safe place to stay. I'd offer our boarding services, but we're full with the holiday weekend coming up. She paused, studying Marcus's face. You've gotten attached already, haven't you? Marcus shrugged, embarrassed. Lily's already planning how to spend her allowance on dog food. Dr. Reynolds smiled. Well, he needs somewhere to recover for a few days anyway. That paw needs rest. As they were finishing up, the receptionist poked her head in. Dr. Reynolds, there's a call for you on line 2 about the found dog. Marcus and Dr. Reynolds exchanged surprised glances. That was fast, she said, picking up the phone. The conversation was brief and one-sided, with Dr. Reynolds mostly listening and occasionally saying, Yes, I understand. When she hung up, her expression was puzzled. Well, that was unusual. The owner's representative has confirmed this is their dog. His name is Apollo, by the way, but they've asked if you would be willing to foster him for a week while they handle some arrangements. She made air quotes around the word. They're offering compensation, Marcus frowned. What kind of arrangements? They didn't specify, but they're offering $500 for the week, plus they'll cover any expenses, food, supplies, medication, for his paw. Marcus's eyes widened. $500 would cover the electric bill and Lily's upcoming school trip to the Science Museum. A week, that's it? That's what they said. They'll contact you directly to arrange pickup next Friday. She handed him a card. Their representative will call you this afternoon to confirm and arrange payment. Marcus looked down at Apollo, who had settled at his feet, still wary but seemingly resigned to his company. I guess we're roommates for a week, buddy. Across town, in the penthouse suite of the Harrington Tower, Eleanor Harrington ended the call and set her phone down with deliberate care on the glass desk that dominated her home office. The Manhattan skyline spread out 40 stories below her, a view most would kill for, but one she rarely noticed anymore. At 34, Eleanor was used to people seeing the Harrington name before they saw her. Daughter of manufacturing mogul Richard Harrington and his socialite wife Victoria, she had inherited not only their vast fortune after their deaths in a private plane crash 6 years ago, but also the crushing weight of their expectations. Ms. Harrington, her personal assistant James, appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. The board meeting has been moved to 3 o'clock, and Mr. Whitfield called again about the foundation gala. Eleanor nodded absently, her mind still on the call. They found Apollo. James's professional demeanor softened. That's wonderful news. Where? Pine Grove. Some man found him in the storm last night. Eleanor turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows. They want me to wait a week before collecting him. A week? May I ask why? Eleanor's reflection in the glass showed a woman meticulously put together, tailored charcoal suit, dark hair pulled back, in a sleek chignon, not a detail out of place. The perfect Harrington heiress. Only those closest to her might notice the shadows under her eyes, skillfully concealed but present nonetheless. Because I need time, she said simply. James had been with her long enough to know when not to press. I'll make the arrangements. Should I prepare the usual NDA for when we retrieve Apollo? Eleanor turned, a rare smile softening her features. Yes, but make the compensation generous. According to the vet, he's taking good care of Apollo. She paused. Find out who he is, James. Discreetly. Of course, Miss Harrington. James made a note on his tablet. Will you be attending the charity auction tonight? The smile vanished. Do I have a choice? The Harrington Foundation is the primary sponsor. I'll have the car ready at 7. When James left, Eleanor moved to her private study where a collection of framed photographs sat on an antique sideboard, the only personal touches in an otherwise impeccably but impersonally decorated penthouse. She picked up one showing a younger version of herself with Apollo as a puppy, both sitting on a weathered dock at the Harrington Lake House in the Adirondacks. It was the last photo taken before her parents' accident, Apollo had been her constant companion since then, the only living being who wanted nothing from her but her presence. 3 weeks ago, during a rare moment of rebellion, she had taken him for a walk herself instead of using the dog walker. He had slipped his leash when startled by a car backfiring, bolting into Central Park. Despite an extensive search, private investigators, and a substantial reward, he had vanished. Until now. Eleanor set the photo down and checked her watch. The Westchester property needed to be prepared if her plan was going to work. 1 week to ensure everything was perfect. 1 week of freedom for both of them before returning to reality. She picked up her phone and dialed. "Philip, it's Eleanor Harrington. I need the Westchester house opened up immediately, and I need your absolute discretion about it." By the time Marcus's truck rumbled into the driveway that evening, Lily was already waiting on the porch with Mrs. Rodriguez, bouncing on her toes with anticipation. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across the lawn that needed mowing, another item on Marcus's endless to-do list. "Dad! Did you bring him home? Can I see him?" Lily called, racing down the steps. Marcus smiled, bone-tired after pulling a double shift to make up for his late arrival. "He's in the truck. His name's Apollo, and he's only staying for a week." Lily's face fell momentarily before brightening again. "A whole week? That's better than nothing." She peered through the passenger window, where Apollo sat watching her warily. "Mrs. Rodriguez approached with a knowing smile. "So you're a dog-sitter now, Marcus?" "Apparently." He shrugged. "It's complicated, but the owner's paying well." The older woman gave him a speculative look. Lily mentioned it's a fancy dog. Border collie mix. Smart, according to the vet. Marcus opened the truck door slowly, keeping a hand on Apollo's new leash. "Easy, buddy. This is Lily." Apollo remained, tense but allowed himself to be coaxed from the truck. On the drive home from the vet, Marcus had stopped to purchase dog supplies, food, bowls, a bed, and a few toys. The cost covered by a prepaid card the mysterious owner had arranged to be delivered to the clinic with surprising efficiency. "He's beautiful," Lily breathed, kneeling at a respectful distance. "Hi, Apollo. I'm going to be your friend this week." To Marcus's surprise, Apollo studied Lily for a long moment, then cautiously stepped forward to sniff her outstretched hand. "He likes you," Marcus said softly. "Of course he does," Lily replied with the absolute certainty of a 12-year-old. "He knows we're going to take care of him." After Mrs. Rodriguez departed with promises to bring over some homemade dog biscuits. My Pepper loved them, God rest his soul. Marcus and Lily settled into their evening routine, now modified to include Apollo. The dog kept his distance, observing their movements from the corner of the living room where Marcus had set up his new bed. Over a dinner of spaghetti and meatballs, one of the few dishes Marcus had mastered, Lily peppered him with questions. "What's his owner like? Is it a man or a woman? Are they nice? Why don't they want him back for a week?" Marcus twirled pasta onto his fork. "I don't know, Lil. I haven't spoken directly to the owner, just their representative." "That's weird." Lily frowned. "Maybe it's someone famous, like a movie star or a spy." Marcus laughed. "I think a spy would have better control of their dog." He glanced at Apollo, who had moved closer to the table, drawn by the smell of meatballs. "Though he does seem well-trained. Just spooked." As if to prove the point, Apollo sat perfectly at the edge of the kitchen, his posture impeccable despite his still wary eyes. "Can I give him a meatball?" Lily asked. "Just one. We don't know what kind of fancy food he's used to." Lily carefully placed a small meatball on the floor near Apollo. The dog looked at it, then at Marcus, seeming to wait for permission. "It's okay," Marcus said, surprised. Apollo delicately took the meatball and retreated a few steps to eat it. "See? He's so polite," Lily beamed. "Not like Max, who would snatch food right out of your hand." The mention of their old dog brought a bittersweet smile to Marcus's face. Max had other qualities. After dinner, as Lily worked on homework at the kitchen table, Marcus's phone rang with an unknown number. He stepped onto the back porch to answer. Hello, Mr. Bennett? A crisp professional voice responded. This is James Wilson calling regarding Apollo. Yes, the vet said someone would be in touch. I represent Apollo's owner, who wishes to remain anonymous for privacy reasons. I understand you've agreed to care for him until next Friday. Marcus leaned against the porch railing. That's right. Though I'm curious why the owner can't take him back sooner. There was a slight pause. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to discuss the details. However, I can assure you that Apollo is deeply valued, and his owner is extremely grateful for your assistance during this transitional period. Transitional period? Marcus repeated, his curiosity piqued. As I said, I cannot elaborate. However, the owner has authorized me to provide whatever is necessary for Apollo's comfort, as well as fair compensation for your time. The prepaid card you received contains $1,000. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. 1,000? The vet said 500. The amount was increased upon review of the situation. The owner is particularly impressed by the care you've already shown and wants to ensure Apollo's needs are fully met. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, stunned. $1,000 would cover not just the electric bill and Lily's field trip, but also the overdue car payment he'd been stressing about. That's very generous. Additionally, I'll need to schedule a brief visit tomorrow to deliver Apollo's medication and some personal items. Would afternoon be convenient? Sure. I work until 4, but after that is fine. Excellent. I'll arrive at 4:30. And Mr. Bennett? Yes? The owner would appreciate your discretion in this matter. No social media posts about Apollo, no discussions about his ownership with others. The prepaid card is untraceable, and we'd like to keep the arrangement confidential. Marcus frowned. Is there something illegal going on here? James's voice remained unruffled. Nothing of the sort. It's merely a privacy concern. I assure you everything is above board. After ending the call, Marcus stood on the porch for several minutes, watching the last light fade from the sky. The whole situation felt surreal. Mysterious, wealthy dog owners, untraceable payments, secretive representatives. It sounded like something from one of Lily's novels. When he went back inside, he found Lily on the floor beside Apollo's bed, reading aloud from her science textbook while the dog watched her with apparent interest. He likes when I read to him, she explained. I can tell. Marcus smiled, not having the heart to tell her about the week-long limitation of their arrangement. Just don't get too attached, Lil. Remember, he has an owner who misses him. Lily nodded without looking up. I know, but we can still be friends for now. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, balancing his checkbook with the unexpected windfall factored in. For the first time in months, the numbers didn't leave him with a knot in his stomach. He was just closing the laptop when a soft whine caught his attention. Apollo stood in the doorway, his ears perked forward. Can't sleep? Marcus asked quietly. The dog took a hesitant step forward, then another until he was beside Marcus's chair. Slowly he lay down, not touching Marcus but closer than he'd been all day. Making progress, huh? Marcus reached down, moving gradually, and let his hand hover near Apollo's head. After a moment's consideration, Apollo leaned forward just enough for Marcus's fingers to brush his fur. Good boy. They sat like that for a while, the silence comfortable rather than tense. Eventually, Marcus yawned. Time for bed. Apollo. Big. A day tomorrow with your fancy representative coming. As he rose, Apollo did too, following Marcus down the hallway. Marcus paused at Lily's door, cracking it open to check on her as he did every night. In the dim glow of her nightlight, he could see her sleeping peacefully, one arm flung over her head, in a gesture so like her mother's that it made his chest ache. Apollo watched the ritual with attentive eyes, then followed Marcus to his bedroom. To Marcus's surprise, the dog passed his new plush bed in the corner and jumped onto Marcus's bed, turning in a circle before settling at the foot. That's not your spot, Marcus said, without much conviction. Apollo just watched him, his head on his paws. Marcus sighed. One night. Don't make it a habit. As he lay in the darkness, listening to the soft sound of Apollo's breathing, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his ordinary life had just taken a sharp turn into uncharted territory. He'd learned just how sharp the next day. James Wilson arrived at precisely 4:30 p.m. in a sleek black Audi that stood out like a sore thumb on Marcus's modest street. From the kitchen window, Marcus watched the tall, impeccably dressed man retrieve a leather duffel bag from the trunk before approaching the front door. "He looks like a spy," Lily whispered, peering around Marcus. Apollo, who had spent most of the day gradually warming up to them, immediately tensed at the sound of the car door closing. "He's not a spy," Marcus assured her, though privately he wasn't entirely convinced. "Remember what we discussed? Let me handle the conversation." The doorbell rang, and Apollo retreated to Lily's bedroom. Marcus straightened his shirt and opened the door. "Mr. Bennett." James extended his hand. "James Wilson, thank you for accommodating me on short notice." Up close, James looked to be in his early 40s, with the polished efficiency of someone who made problems disappear for a living. His handshake was firm but brief. "Come in," Marcus said, suddenly conscious of the worn furniture and the ceiling stain from last month's roof leak he hadn't yet fixed. "This is my daughter, Lily, Miss Bennett." James nodded formally to Lily, who stared back with undisguised curiosity. "A pleasure." "Are you really a spy?" Lily blurted out. "Lily," Marcus admonished, but James's expression softened marginally. "I assure you my work is far less exciting," he replied. "I'm a personal assistant." "To who?" Lily pressed. "To whom?" Marcus corrected automatically. James set the duffel bag on the coffee table. "I've brought Apollo's things, his medication for the sprained paw, his favorite toys, and his usual food. The vet mentioned he's undernourished, so his owner suggests gradually increasing his portions." Marcus noticed the deft change of subject. "About the owner, I'm afraid I can only share limited information," James cut in smoothly. "However, I can tell you that Apollo went missing during a walk in Central Park 3 weeks ago. His owner has been searching extensively." "Central Park?" Marcus frowned. "That's in New York City. We're over 100 miles away." James nodded. "It appears Apollo traveled quite a distance. The storms likely drove him further than he intended." "Smart." "Dog," Lily commented, settling on the floor. "Apollo, come meet your friend." To Marcus's surprise, Apollo emerged cautiously from the hallway. Upon seeing James, he froze, then, after a moment's hesitation, trotted over and sat directly in front of him, his posture alert. "Hello, old friend," James said, his professional demeanor cracking slightly as he knelt to stroke Apollo's head. "You've given everyone quite a scare." Apollo permitted the touch, but seemed more dutiful than affectionate. After a perfunctory tail wag, he returned to Lily's side. "He remembers you," Marcus observed. "We've known each other for 6 years, James said, straightening up, "since he was a puppy." For the first time, Marcus caught a glimpse of genuine emotion in the man's carefully controlled expression. "You care about him. He's special to everyone who knows him." James cleared his throat. "Now, regarding the care instructions." For the next 15 minutes, James outlined Apollo's routine, his dietary preferences, exercise needs, and command. She knew. It was more information than seemed necessary for a week-long stay, and Marcus found himself wondering why the owner would part with a clearly beloved pet for even that long. "Is the owner sick?" Marcus asked when James finally paused. "Is that why they can't take him now?" James's expression revealed nothing. "The situation is complicated but temporary. I assure you, this arrangement benefits everyone involved." He checked his watch. "I should be going. I have a long drive back." At the door, James hesitated. "One more thing, Mr. Bennett. At some point during the week, the owner may wish to check on Apollo personally. If that occurs, I'll contact you first to arrange it." Marcus frowned. I thought the whole point was that the owner couldn't take Apollo right now. Checking on him and providing full-time care are different matters. James handed Marcus a business card with only a phone number printed on it. If you need anything at all, call this number, day or night. After James departed, Marcus examined the duffel bag's contents more carefully. The medication was from a veterinary practice in Manhattan. The dog food was an organic brand he'd never heard of, and nestled among the plush toys was Asoft Blue. Collar with a silver tag engraved simply with Apollo on one side and Harrington on the other. Harrington, Marcus murmured, the name tickling something in his memory. What's that, Dad? Lily asked, already engaged in a gentle tug-of-war with Apollo, using one of his new toys. Nothing. Marcus set the collar aside, making a mental note to Google the name later. How about pizza for dinner? By Sunday afternoon, Apollo had fully integrated himself into their weekend routine. The skittish dog of Friday night had been replaced by an increasingly confident companion who followed Lily everywhere and had claimed the foot of Marcus's bed as his sleeping spot. They were at Pine Grove Community Park, Marcus watching from a bench as Lily threw a tennis ball for Apollo. Despite his still-healing paw, the dog moved with graceful precision, his body a blur of black and white as he raced after the ball. "He's a beauty," commented an elderly man walking past with a pug. "Border collie. Mix, I think," Marcus replied, feeling a strange pride that wasn't rightfully his. "We're just watching him for a week," the man nodded. "Smart dogs, too smart sometimes. My daughter has one, reads her mind, I swear." Marcus had noticed that too. Apollo seemed to anticipate their needs, moving out of the way before being asked, responding. To subtle cues, neither Bennett had realized they were giving. "Dad, look," Lily called. She had Apollo sitting at attention while she balanced the tennis ball on his nose. At her signal, he flipped it upward and caught it. "Definitely someone's well-trained pet," Marcus murmured to himself. His phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. How is Apollo settling in? Has his paw improved? Marcus frowned, thumb hovering over the screen. The number wasn't James's. "Who is this?" he replied. There was a long pause before the response came. "Someone concerned about Apollo's welfare." Marcus glanced up at Lily and Apollo, now sprawled together on the grass looking at clouds. "He's doing great. Very smart dog. Paw seems better." "Who are you?" Another pause. "Just a friend. Thank you for taking care of him." Before Marcus could reply again, another text appeared. "What does he think of the duck toy?" "It's his favorite." Marcus recalled the stuffed duck from the duffel bag, which Apollo had indeed carried around the house. This was definitely someone who knew the dog, loves it, sleeps with it. Then, taking a chance, "Are you his owner?" The reply was immediate this time. "Please just take good care of him." The cryptic exchange left Marcus more confused than ever, but he didn't have time to dwell on it as Lily came running up with Apollo at her heels. "Dad, can we get ice cream from the truck?" "Please." "Sure, kiddo." He pocketed his phone. "I think we all deserve a treat." Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Marcus finally had a chance to search Harrington online. The results were immediate and overwhelming. Harrington Industries, a multinational manufacturing and technology. Corporation Harrington Foundation, one of the largest private philanthropic organizations in the country. And Richard and Victoria Harrington, billionaire power couple killed in a private plane crash 6 years ago, leaving their empire to their only daughter, Eleanor. Marcus clicked on an image search and found himself looking at a familiar face. The woman from countless business magazines and charity galas, known as much for her reclusiveness as for her fortune. Eleanor Harrington, said to be worth over $11 billion, was repeatedly described as intensely private, publicity-averse, and the ghost CEO. In most photos, she looked untouchable, perfectly styled, expression carefully neutral as she stood at podiums or excited expensive cars. But one image caught Marcus's attention. Eleanor at some outdoor event, her professional mask momentarily dropped as she knelt beside a black and white border collie, genuine affection lighting her face. "Well, I'll be damned," Marcus whispered, looking over at Apollo, who was watching him from the bed with those intelligent eyes. "Your mum's kind of a big deal, buddy." The revelation left Marcus unsettled. What was Eleanor Harrington's dog doing in Pine Grove? Why the secrecy and strange arrangements? And why did one of the richest women in America need a week before reclaiming her pet? As if sensing his thoughts, Apollo jumped down from the bed and came to rest his head on Marcus's knee, looking up with an expression that seemed almost apologetic. "Not your fault," Marcus assured him, scratching behind his ears. "But I think there's more to this story than anyone's telling me." In her Westchester estate, Eleanor sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by paint samples, furniture catalogues, and blueprints. The formal dining room had been transformed into command central for what James had diplomatically termed her project. Her phone lay on the blueprint, the text exchange with Marcus Bennett still open. She hadn't planned to contact him directly. It was an impulsive decision she now second-guessed. But the photos James had discreetly taken of Apollo with the Bennett family had stirred something in her. The dog looked happy, relaxed in a way he rarely was, with the rotation of staff at her various residences. "Ms. Harrington," James appeared in the doorway. "The contractor is here to discuss the renovations." Eleanor nodded, rising gracefully despite having sat on the floor for hours. "Send him in. And James, have you completed the background check on Marcus Bennett?" "Yes, ma'am. The report is on your tablet." When James left, Eleanor picked up her tablet and skimmed the information. Marcus Bennett, 38, widower, auto mechanic at Grayson's Auto. Wife Caroline died of breast cancer 4 years ago. Daughter Lily, 12, attends Pine Grove Academy on scholarship. Financials, stretched thin but managing. No criminal record. Active in community coaching youth baseball. Former military, army, honorable discharge. An ordinary man living an ordinary life. The kind of life Eleanor sometimes allowed herself to imagine in her most private moments. The contractor entered, and Eleanor smoothly shifted into her professional persona, the tablet and its contents temporarily forgotten. But later that night, as she stood at the window of what would become Apollo's room in the house, she found herself wondering about the man who had rescued her dog on a rainy night, expecting nothing in return. "Ms. Harrington?" James's voice interrupted. Her thoughts. "The board is requesting an emergency conference call. There are concerns about the Singapore acquisition." Eleanor sighed, the brief moment of contemplation evaporating. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. And shall I continue monitoring the Bennett situation?" Eleanor paused, then nodded. "Yes, I want daily updates on Apollo." "Of course." James hesitated. "May I ask?" The texting was unplanned. "A momentary indulgence," Eleanor admitted. "It won't happen again." But as she prepared for the call, Eleanor found herself thinking not of Singapore or acquisitions, but of a weathered pickup truck and a man who would rescue a strange dog in a storm. By Wednesday, Apollo had become a fixture in the Bennett household. Morning runs with Marcus, afternoons with Lily after school, and evenings spent in the comfortable quiet of their living room. The dog had seamlessly integrated himself into their lives as if he'd always been there. "I wish we could keep him," Lily said that evening as she scratched Apollo's belly, his paw now almost completely healed. "Friday's gonna come too fast." Marcus looked up from the bills he was sorting at the kitchen table. The reminder of Apollo's temporary status sent an unexpected pang through him. "I know, kiddo, but we knew the deal from the beginning." "Maybe his owner will let us visit him sometimes," Lily suggested, her voice hopeful. Marcus thought about Eleanor Harrington, her multiple homes and jet-setting lifestyle reported in the business profile she'd read. "I don't think it works that way, Lil." Apollo seemed to sense the melancholy in the room. He stood, stretched, and moved between them, first leaning against Lily, then walking to Marcus and placing his head on Marcus's knee. "It's like he understands us," Lily said. "He probably does. Border collies are supposed to be as smart as a 5-year-old kid." The doorbell rang, startling them all. Apollo's ears perked up, but he didn't bark. He never did, Marcus had noticed. "Are we expecting anyone?" Lily asked. Marcus shook his head, rising to answer the door. Mrs. Rodriguez sometimes dropped by with baked goods, but it was late for a social call. When he opened the door, he found himself facing a woman he'd only seen in photographs. Eleanor Harrington stood in his porch, looking both exactly like and nothing like her pictures. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail rather than the sleek updo from magazine covers. Instead of designer clothing, she wore jeans, a simple sweater, and a leather jacket. But there was no mistaking the sharp intelligence in those grey eyes, or the perfect posture that spoke of a lifetime of privilege. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice surprisingly warm, "I apologize for coming unannounced." For a moment Marcus could only stare. Then his manners kicked in. "Miss Harrington, this is unexpected." A hint of amusement flickered across her face. "You recognized me. James mentioned you might have done some research." It wasn't hard to connect the dots once I saw the name on Apollo's tag, Marcus admitted. "Would you like to come in?" She hesitated, glancing past him into the house. "I don't want to intrude. I wanted to see him." Before Marcus could respond, there was a blur of movement behind him, and suddenly Apollo was there, pushing past to reach Eleanor. His entire demeanor transformed, tail wagging frantically, body wiggling with excitement as he circled and leapt around her. "Hello, my love," Eleanor murmured, kneeling to embrace the dog, all composure momentarily abandoned as Apollo licked her face. "I've missed you too." The naked emotion on her face made Marcus feel like an intruder in his own doorway. He cleared his throat. "He's clearly missed you." Eleanor looked up, composing herself but still holding Apollo close. "Thank you for taking such good care of him. James says he's thriving here." "Dad? Who is it?" Lily appeared beside Marcus, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. "Are you Apollo's mum?" Eleanor rose gracefully, one hand remaining on Apollo's head. "I am. You must be Lily. Apollo has told me all about you." Lily's face lit up. "He did, in his way." Eleanor smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "He's very attached to you already." Marcus found himself staring again. The Eleanor Harrington on his porch bore little resemblance to the Ice Queen of business journals. This woman was warm, almost approachable. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" he heard himself offering. "Or tea?" Eleanor appeared genuinely torn, glancing at her watch. "I shouldn't. I have calls tonight, and—" "Please," Lily interjected. "I want to show you the tricks I taught Apollo." Something in Lily's earnest invitation seemed to break through Eleanor's hesitation, perhaps just for a little while. Inside, Eleanor perched on the edge of the couch, while Lily proudly demonstrated how she'd taught Apollo to play dead and give high five. Apollo performed flawlessly, clearly enjoying the attention from both his temporary and permanent families. Marcus brought coffee for himself and Eleanor, hot chocolate for Lily. He noticed how Eleanor's eyes took in every detail of their modest living room, the faded furniture, the school photos of Lily on the mantel, the baseball trophies from the team Marcus coached. "You have a lovely home," she said, accepting the coffee. "It's nothing special, but it's ours," Marcus replied, settling into his armchair. "So, I'm guessing there's more to Apollo's story than what James shared?" Eleanor took a sip of coffee, using the moment to consider her words. "Apollo went missing 3 weeks ago in Central Park. I was walking him myself, something I rarely do because of security concerns." She glanced at Lily, who was now showing Apollo pictures in a school book. "A car backfired, he got spooked and slipped his leash. Despite searches, rewards, and private investigators, he vanished until he showed up here," Marcus finished. "But that doesn't explain the week-long arrangement." Eleanor set her cup down. No, it doesn't. She seemed to be weighing how much to share. The truth is, Mr. Bennett, Marcus, please. Marcus, she tested the name. The truth is, I'm making some changes in my life. Changes that required preparation before Apollo could come home. What kind of changes make you wait a week to get your dog back? Marcus asked, his directness surprising even himself. Instead of taking offense, Eleanor seemed to appreciate his candor. Fair question. I'm relocating temporarily from a Manhattan penthouse to my house in Westchester County. And that takes a week to arrange. Don't you have staff for that? It's not just the physical move, Eleanor explained, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. It's a lifestyle change. I've been reassessing certain priorities recently. Marcus studied her, sensing there was much more she wasn't saying. Apollo's disappearance scared you. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly, surprised by his perception. Yes, she admitted. More than I expected. It made me realize how isolated I've become, how much of my life is managed by others. She glanced at Apollo, now contentedly leaning against Lily's side. He's the only one who knows the real me, not the Harrington heiress. The confession seemed to surprise Eleanor herself. She straightened, professional mask slipping back into place. I've said more than I intended. The point is, the Westchester house is being prepared specifically with Apollo's needs in mind, and it won't be ready until Friday. So you're moving to the suburbs for your dog? Marcus asked, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. For myself, Eleanor corrected. Apollo is simply the catalyst. She checked her watch again. I should go. I've imposed enough. As she rose, Apollo looked torn, glancing between Eleanor and Lily. The dog's dilemma wasn't lost on Eleanor. He's bonded with you both, she observed, a complex emotion crossing her face. That's unusual for him. He tends to be aloof with strangers. We're not exactly strangers anymore, Marcus pointed out. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. No, you're not. She knelt to give Apollo one more scratch behind the ears. I'll see you soon, boy. At the door, she turned to Marcus. Thank you again for everything you've done. The arrangement stands. Apollo stays until Friday, and of course, the compensation remains. We're not doing this for the money, Marcus found himself saying, I know. Her gaze was direct, assessing. That's precisely why I trust you with him. As Eleanor walked to her car, a surprisingly modest Audi, rather than the chauffeured luxury vehicle Marcus had half expected, Lily joined her, father in the doorway. She seems nice, Lily observed, not like a billionaire at all. No, Marcus agreed, watching Eleanor drive away. Not what I expected. That night, after Lily was asleep, Marcus found himself unable to stop thinking about Eleanor Harrington. The woman who had sat in his living room seemed at odds with the calculating business titan portrayed in the media. There had been vulnerability in her eyes when she spoke about Apollo, a genuine warmth when she interacted with Lily. Apollo jumped onto the bed, circling before settling at Marcus's feet. Your mum's full of surprises, Marcus told him, receiving a thoughtful head tilt in response. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number, thank you for the coffee, and for not asking all the questions. I could see you wanted to, Eleanor again. Marcus found himself smiling as he typed his reply. You're welcome. You left Lily with stars in her eyes, meeting a real life dog princess, as she put it. The reply came quickly. Dog princess? That's a new one. Usually it's Ice Queen or Ghost CEO. Not very creative, the business press. There was a pause before her next message. Lily is a remarkable child. You must be very proud. Marcus looked at the school photo on his dresser. Lily with her mother's smile and his stubborn chin. Every day, even the difficult ones, especially those, I'd imagine. Another pause. I'd like to bring Apollo to visit after Friday, if that would be all right. The message surprised him. You'd be welcome any time. Lily would love it. Just Lily, came the response. and Marcus could almost hear the teasing tone. Apollo's fan club has 2 founding members. Lifetime membership. Good to know. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Eleanor. Marcus set his phone down, aware that something had shifted. What had begun as a simple good deed, rescuing a lost dog, had somehow connected him to a woman who lived in a world entirely different from his own. And despite all logic suggesting otherwise, he found himself looking forward to seeing her again. The Harrington Industries executive boardroom fell silent as Eleanor concluded her presentation. 14 pairs of eyes, belonging to men primarily, in their 50s and 60s, stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to outright disapproval. Let me see if I understand correctly. Philip Whitmore, the eldest board member and her father's former right-hand man, finally spoke. You want to step back from day-to-day operations for 3 months to focus on a personal project? That's correct, Eleanor replied calmly. As I've outlined, Janet is more than capable of handling the CEO responsibilities temporarily. I'll remain available for major decisions and continue to chair the foundation. This is unprecedented, Whitmore continued. Richard would never... My father is no longer here, Eleanor cut in, her voice firm but not unkind. And with all due respect to his memory, his approach to work-life balance is not one I choose to emulate. Murmurs circulated around the table. Eleanor had never before publicly deviated from her father's business philosophy. The timing is problematic with the Singapore acquisition, offered Diane Chen, one of the few female board members. The Lim family specifically wants your involvement, and they'll have it, Eleanor assured her. I'm stepping back, not disappearing. The difference is that I'll be working from Westchester rather than Manhattan, and I'll be delegating matters that don't require my specific attention. May I ask what this personal project entails? Whitmore pressed. The shareholders expect certain standards from the Harrington name. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. The project is private, Philip, but I can assure you it violates no ethical standards and will not reflect poorly on the company. The discussion continued for another 40 minutes, but Eleanor had prepared thoroughly. She had anticipated every objection, prepared contingencies for every scenario. By the end, even Whitmore had grudgingly accepted the arrangement, though his parting words carried a clear warning. 3 months, Eleanor. Not a day more. After the board dispersed, Eleanor remained seated, staring at the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. For the first time in years, she had directly challenged the path laid out for her. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. That went better than expected, James commented as he entered to collect her materials. They're not happy, Eleanor replied, but they don't have to be. The voting structure my father established ensures they can't override me. James nodded, his expression neutral but supportive. The Westchester renovations are complete. The security system was installed this morning, and the grounds have been secured according to your specifications. And the other matter, I've compiled the information you requested on local schools in the Westchester area, focusing on those with strong science programs as you specified. Eleanor accepted the tablet he offered, scanning the detailed report. Pine Grove Academy is on this list. Yes, ma'am. It's actually quite prestigious despite being smaller than some of the others. Their scholarship program is quite progressive. Eleanor thought of Lily Bennett, her bright eyes and easy way with Apollo. Schedule a tour. For next week, anonymous donation potential, not as a Harrington. If James found the request unusual, he didn't show it. Of course. Will there be anything else? Eleanor hesitated, then made a decision. Yes, I'd like you to arrange something for the Bennetts, a thank you gift for Apollo's care. I've already arranged for the agreed-upon payment to be not money, Eleanor interrupted. Something more personal. Let me think about it and get back to you. After James left, Eleanor unlocked her phone and looked at the text exchange with Marcus from the previous night. Something about his straightforward manner and lack of pretense had stayed with her. In her world of carefully calculated interactions, His genuineness was refreshing. She found herself typing a new message. Apollo misses you both already. He's been carrying his duck toy everywhere and looking expectantly at the door. The reply came a few minutes later. Tell him his temporary family misses him too. Lily made a countdown calendar to Friday. Eleanor smiled, an increasingly common occurrence. Lately, I hope that means you'll both be home when we come topic him up. Wouldn't miss it. Lily's already planning his goodbye party. Don't worry, it's just cupcakes, not a full gala event. I'm sure it will be perfect. Eleanor paused, then added, I'm looking forward to it, and the surprising part was, she truly was. Friday arrived with a sense of bittersweet anticipation in the Bennett household. Lily had decorated the living room with handmade, "We'll miss you" Apollo signs, and a plate of cupcakes, slightly lopsided but lovingly frosted, sat on the coffee table. Apollo seemed to sense the significance of the day, staying unusually close to both Marcus and Lily as they moved through their morning routine. What time is the dog princess coming? Lily asked, adjusting the paper crown she'd made for Apollo, who tolerated the accessory with dignified patience. Around 5, Marcus replied, checking his phone for the third time that hour. Eleanor had texted earlier confirming their appointment, her message politely formal compared to their previous exchanges. Right after I get home from work. Lily's face fell slightly. That's so many hours away. Time for one last adventure with Apollo before school, Marcus suggested, grabbing the tennis ball that had become a staple of their morning ritual. The impromptu game in the backyard made them 10 minutes late for school, but Marcus couldn't bring himself to care. The joy on Lily's face as she gave Apollo one final hug before climbing out of the truck was worth it. Be good for Dad, she instructed the dog solemnly. I'll see you after school for the party. Work at Grayson's Auto dragged interminably. Marcus found himself checking the clock every 15 minutes, his mind wandering from the transmission he was rebuilding to thoughts of Eleanor Harrington and her imminent arrival. It wasn't just about Apollo anymore, though the thought of saying goodbye to the dog created a hollow feeling in his chest. It was also about seeing Eleanor again, something he was looking forward to more than he cared to admit. Earth to Bennett, Frank Grayson called, waving a greasy hand in front of Marcus's face. That transmission gonna fix itself? Sorry, Frank, Marcus mumbled, refocusing on the task at hand. What's with you today? Got a hot date or something? Marcus snorted. Yeah, right. A date with a billionaire. The thought was so absurd it almost made him laugh out loud. Eleanor Harrington inhabited a different universe, one where men like Marcus Bennett existed only as service providers, mechanics, plumbers, the invisible workforce that kept her world running smoothly. Yet he couldn't forget the woman who had sat in his living room drinking coffee, who had texted him late at night, whose carefully maintained facade had cracked when she spoke about her dog. That woman had seemed approachable, real. At 4:30, Marcus clocked out, rushed home to shower and change, and was just pulling on a clean shirt when his phone rang. Unknown number, but not Eleanor's. Hello, Mr. Bennett, James's crisp voice. I'm calling regarding today's arrangement. We're all set here, Marcus assured him, a flutter of anticipation in his stomach. Lily's even baked cupcakes. There was a pause. I'm afraid there's been a change of plans. Miss Harrington will not be able to collect Apollo today. The disappointment hit Marcus with surprising force. Oh, when will she come instead? That's what I'm calling to discuss. James's voice was carefully neutral. Miss Harrington has been in an accident. Marcus froze, shirt half buttoned. What? Is she all right? She's stable, but sustained several injuries. Her car was struck by a delivery truck that ran a red light. She's currently in surgery at New York Presbyterian. Marcus sank onto the edge of his bed, Apollo immediately pressing against his leg in a gesture of comfort. That's... Jesus! When did this happen? Approximately 2 hours ago. She was en route to a meeting before coming to collect Apollo. Does she have family with her? Someone to be there when she wakes up? The questions tumbled out before Marcus could consider how inappropriate they might be. Another pause from James. Ms. Harrington's parents are deceased, as you may know. She has no siblings or close family. The thought of Eleanor waking up alone in a hospital room sent an unexpected pang through Marcus's chest. What about Apollo? What happens now? That's why I'm calling. Ms. Harrington left explicit instructions that in the event of any emergency, Apollo's care was to be her priority. She's arranged for his stay with you to be extended, with appropriate compensation, of course, until she's recovered enough to care for him. Forget the compensation, Marcus said immediately. We're happy to keep him as long as needed. Just keep me updated on how she's doing. I'll relay your concern, James replied, his professional tone softening slightly. And Mr. Bennett, she mentioned you specifically in her instructions. She trusts you with him. After hanging up, Marcus sat quietly with Apollo, absently stroking the dog's head while processing the news. The prospect of Eleanor being seriously injured disturbed him more than it logically should for someone he barely knew. Looks like you're staying with us a while longer, buddy, he finally said to Apollo. But this isn't how any of us wanted it to happen. When Lily arrived home, bubbling with excitement for the party, Marcus had to break the news. Her initial joy at keeping Apollo longer quickly transformed into genuine concern for the dog princess. Is she going to be okay? Lily asked, her voice small. I think so, kiddo. James said she's stable, which is doctor speak for not in immediate danger. We should make her a get-well card, Lily decided. Apollo can put his paw print on it. Marcus smiled, despite his worry. That's a kind thought. I'm sure she'd appreciate it. That evening, as they ate the goodbye cupcakes that had become impromptu get-well treats, Marcus's phone buzzed with another. Call from James. Ms. Harrington is out of surgery, he reported without preamble. The procedures were successful, but her recovery will take time. Broken ribs, a fractured wrist, and internal bleeding that's been addressed. Thank God, Marcus breathed. Is she conscious? Intermittently. She asked about Apollo when she briefly woke earlier. Marcus shook his head, amazed. Of course she did tell her he's fine and not to worry about anything except getting better. He will. She also... James hesitated uncharacteristically. She mentioned your name, Mr. Bennett. I believe she wastes treeing to communicate something about today's scheduled meeting. Just tell her we're thinking of her, Marcus replied, unsure what else to say. Apollo, Lily, and me. After the call, Marcus found himself unable to settle. He puttered around the house, straightening things that didn't need straightening, while Apollo watched him with knowing eyes. What? Marcus finally asked the dog. I'm concerned about a friend. That's normal. Apollo tilted his head skeptically. Fine. Not exactly a friend, but not a stranger either. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. Something in between. His phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but not Eleanor's or James's. Mr. Bennett, this is Nurse Caldwell at NY Presbyterian. My patient asked me to text you from my phone. She says, I'm sorry about the cupcakes. Rain check? Apple is okay? Marcus smiled, relief washing through him. If Eleanor was coherent enough to remember the cupcakes and use their private nickname for Apollo, she must be doing better than he feared. Tell her the cupcakes will keep. Apollo is perfect, and we're all thinking of her. Rest and heal. The nurse replied a moment later. She smiled and says thank you. She's drifting off now. Hospital meds hitting hard. Marcus set his phone down, a weight lifting from his shoulders. She was going to be okay. Later that night, as he lay in bed with Apollo in his now customary spot by his feet, Marcus found himself reflecting on how dramatically his life had changed in a single week. What had begun as a simple act of kindness, rescuing a dog from the rain, had connected him to a woman he would never have otherwise met, creating an unexpected bond that defied the vast differences in their circumstances. And now, with Eleanor's accident, that connection had deepened in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Apollo wasn't just a temporary visitor anymore. He had become a lifeline between two very different worlds. "Your mum's going to be fine," Marcus assured the dog, who watched him with those intelligent eyes. "And when she's better, we'll figure all this out." Apollo shifted closer, resting his head on Marcus's leg in a gesture that felt like understanding. As Marcus drifted toward sleep, he wondered what Eleanor was doing at that exact moment in her hospital bed. Was she thinking of Apollo, of the meeting they'd missed, of him? The thought should have seemed presumptuous. A mechanic from Pine Grove, imagining himself in the thoughts of Eleanor Harrington. But somehow, in the quiet darkness of his bedroom, with her dog sleeping trustingly beside him, it didn't seem far-fetched at all. 3 weeks passed in a new routine for the Bennett household. Apollo had fully integrated into their lives, joining Marcus on his morning runs, accompanying Lily to her weekend baseball practices, and claiming permanent residence at the foot of Marcus's bed. The original week had stretched first into 2, then 3, as Eleanor's recovery progressed, more slowly than expected. "Dad, Mrs. Rodriguez wants to know if Apollo can come to her grandson's birthday party on Saturday," Lily announced as she burst through the door after school. "They're having a backyard barbecue, and she says Apollo is better behaved than most of the kids who'll be there." Marcus looked up from the kitchen table where he'd been reviewing bills. A less stressful task than before, thanks to the continued compensation from Eleanor. Apollo, hearing his name, trotted over from his spot by the window. "I guess that's fine, as long as you stay with him," Marcus replied. "But remember, Lil—" I know. He's not really ours," Lily finished, the familiar reminder losing its edge as weeks passed with no sign of Apollo's departure. She knelt to hug the dog. "But he feels like ours now." That was the problem, Marcus thought as he watched them together. With each passing day, the inevitable goodbye loomed larger and more painful. His phone updates from James had become a lifeline to Eleanor's recovery and to whatever undefined connection had formed between them. Speaking of which, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unlike the early updates that had come through James or hospital staff, Eleanor had been texting directly for the past week as her condition improved. "Doctor says I can finally go home. Tomorrow. No more hospital food," Marcus smiled, typing his reply. "Great news. Apollo will be thrilled to hear it. So will Lily." "Just Lily?" came the quick response with a winking emoji, something that had surprised Marcus the first time Eleanorist. The Eleanor who texted from her hospital bed was far more relaxed and open than the composed businesswoman he'd briefly met. "The Apollo fan club president is also pleased," he wrote back. "How are you feeling, really?" There was a longer pause before. Her response, sore, tired of being weak, but grateful to be alive. "The doctors say I was lucky, we were all lucky," Marcus replied, surprising himself with the honesty. "Any time frame for when you'll be up for visitors? Apollo has been practicing his best tricks to show you." Another pause. "Actually, that's something I wanted to discuss. Are you free to talk tonight? Around 9 after Lily's in bed." The request sent an unexpected flutter through Marcus's stomach. "Sure. Call whenever you're ready, throughout dinner and Lily's bedtime." Routine. Marcus found himself checking the clock more often than necessary. At precisely 9:01, his phone rang. "Hello?" he answered, settling onto the back porch steps. The April night was mild, stars visible above the modest houses of his neighborhood. "Hi." Eleanor's voice was stronger than he'd expected, though still carrying the rasp of someone recovering from chest injuries. "It's good to hear your voice." "Yours too. You sound better. Don't let the voice fool you." "I'm still moving like an arthritic tortoise," she said with a self-deprecating laugh, "but improving daily. How's Apollo?" "Living his best suburban life," Marcus replied, glancing through the window where Apollo lay on the living room rug with one of Lily's stuffed animals. "I think he's forgotten he's a billionaire's dog." "About that." Eleanor's tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Marcus, I need to ask you something important." He straightened, alert to the change. "What is it?" The doctors say my full recovery will take another 6 to 8 weeks. I can handle the basics now, but Apollo needs more. Runs, play, attention I can't give while I'm healing. You want us to keep him longer, Marcus guessed, relief flooding through him at the prospect of postponing the inevitable separation. Yes, but with a modification to our arrangement. She took a deep breath that caught slightly, revealing the pain she was still in. I'd like to rent the Peterson house next door to you, the one with the for sale sign, and stay there while recover. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. You want to move to Pine Grove, next door to us? Temporarily, she clarified quickly. The city is too much right now. Too many stairs, too much noise, too many people hovering. I need somewhere quiet to heal, somewhere Apollo can be happy, and somewhere, she hesitated, somewhere that feels real. And you chose here. Marcus couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. I chose proximity to the two people Apollo trusts most after me, Eleanor replied. That's the practical explanation. And the impractical one. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. I've spent the last 3 weeks in a hospital bed with nothing but time to think, Marcus. Nearly dying has a way of clarifying what matters. I've realized I've been living a life designed by my parents, maintained by habit and expectation, but not actually chosen by me. And what do you choose? Marcus asked softly. I don't know yet, but I'd like the chance to figure it out somewhere I can breathe. Somewhere like Pine Grove. Another pause. Unless having me as a neighbor would be uncomfortable for you and Lily? No, Marcus said, perhaps too quickly. No, not at all. Lily would be thrilled, and I— He searched for the right words. I think it could be good. For Apollo, I mean. Of course. For Apollo. There was a smile in her voice now. So, it's settled. James has already spoken to the realtor about a short-term rental arrangement. The owners are apparently eager for any income while the house sits on the market. The Petersons moved to Florida 6 months ago, Marcus explained. Nice house, but the market's slow around here. It's perfect for my needs. 1 floor, fenced yard, quiet street. James will have it furnished and ready before I'm discharged tomorrow. Eleanor sounded more animated than she had at the beginning of the call. There's just one more thing, Marcus. What's that? I'm trying to keep this move quiet. The board knows I'm recuperating outside the city, but not specifically where. The press doesn't need to know at all. Your secret's safe with me, Marcus promised. Pine Grove isn't exactly on the paparazzi circuit. After they hung up, Marcus remained on the porch steps, trying to process the unexpected turn of events. Eleanor Harrington, billionaire CEO, Manhattan socialite, epitome of urban luxury, was about to become his next-door neighbor in his modest suburb. The scenario was so improbable, he half wondered if he'd dreamed the entire conversation. Apollo nudged the door open and padded out to sit beside him, resting his head on Marcus's knee. Your mum's coming here, Marcus told him, scratching behind the dog's ears. Our worlds are about to collide, buddy. The next afternoon, Marcus watched from his front yard as a procession of unmarked vehicles delivered furniture, medical equipment, and household supplies to the Peterson house. James supervised the operation with military precision, occasionally conferring with what appeared to be a private nurse and a security specialist. Is the dog princess really going to live there? Lily asked, bouncing on her toes beside him. Marcus had explained the situation over breakfast, and she'd been vibrating with excitement ever since. For a couple of months while she gets better, Marcus confirmed. But remember what we talked about? I know. We have to act normal and not tell anyone who she really is, Lily recited. But can I still visit her? And help with Apollo? We'll see what she wants once she's settled, Marcus said, watching as a state-of-the-art hospital bed was carefully maneuvered through the front door. She's still pretty hurt, Lil. By late afternoon, the parade of vehicles had departed, leaving only a discreet black SUV in the driveway. James approached them, looking immaculate despite the hours of supervision. Miss Harrington will be arriving in approximately 1 hour, he informed them. She asked if you and Lily would bring Apollo over once she's settled. Of course, Marcusy replied. Does she need anything? James's mouth twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. She has everything she could possibly need, except what she wants most, which is currently sitting at your feet. Apollo, as if understanding. He was the topic of conversation, thumped his tail against the grass. I've taken the liberty of creating a gate in the fence between your properties, James continued. Ms. Harrington thought it might facilitate Apollo's transition between households. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You've thought of everything. That's my job, Mr. Bennett. James handed him a small device. This is a direct alert button. If Ms. Harrington needs assistance and you're with her, pressing this will notify both myself and her medical team immediately. The seriousness of Eleanor's condition, which had been somewhat abstract during their phone conversations, suddenly became very real. How bad are her injuries still? James hesitated, weighing professional discretion against practical necessity. The broken ribs are painful but healing. The internal injuries were significant but addressed successfully. Her greatest challenge is fatigue and limited mobility. He lowered his voice so Lily couldn't hear. She's pushing herself too hard as usual. Perhaps you might encourage moderation when appropriate. Me? She barely knows me. She trusts you, James said simply. That's rarer than you might think. An hour later, Marcus and Lily waited on their porch, Apollo sitting patiently between them as a private ambulance pulled up to the Peterson house. James and a medical team carefully helped Eleanor from the vehicle, supporting her ass. She slowly made her way inside. She's really hurt, Lily whispered, her earlier excitement dimming at the sight of Eleanor's careful, pained movements. She's getting better, Marcus assured her. That's why she's here. 20 minutes later, James appeared at their door. Ms. Harrington is ready for visitors, if you're still available. They followed him across the adjoining lawns, through the new gate in the fence, and into what had been transformed into a surprisingly homey space, despite the rapid furnishing. Where Marcus had expected sterile luxury, he found comfortable sofas, warm lighting, and even a few personal touches. Framed photographs, books, a soft throw blanket draped over a chair. Eleanor sat in a recliner by the window, dressed in silk, pajamas under a cashmere robe. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, and without makeup, the fading bruises on her face were visible. She looked simultaneously more vulnerable and more real than the woman who had stood on his porch weeks earlier. The moment Apollo saw her, he bolted forward, only to stop short at the last second, seeming to sense her fragility. Instead of jumping up as he clearly wanted to, he pressed against her legs, his whole body wiggling with restrained excitement. "There's my good boy," Eleanor murmured, carefully leaning down to stroke his head. "I've missed you so much." Apollo gentle, Lily reminded unnecessarily, approaching with more caution than the dog. "Hi, Ms. Harrington. We made you a get-well card." She held out a homemade card decorated with glitter and sporting Apollo's paw. Print in blue paint, Eleanor accepted it with genuine delight. "This is wonderful, Lily, thank you, and please call me Eleanor." Her gaze shifted to Marcus, who still stood near the doorway, struck by the strange intimacy of the moment. "You too, Marcus. No more Miss Harrington, especially if we're going to be neighbors." "How are you feeling?" he asked, moving closer. "Really? Like I was hit by a truck," she replied with a wry smile. "Which is accurate, so I suppose that's appropriate." "Daddy says you're going to stay for 2 whole months," Lily said, settling on the floor beside Apollo. "That's like forever." "It does feel that way sometimes," Eleanor agreed. "I hope you don't mind having me next door." "Are you kidding? It's going to be awesome. We can have Apollo go back and forth, and I can show you the tree fort in our backyard. Well, when you're better. And maybe you can come to my baseball game if you feel good enough, because I'm pitching next Saturday and—" "Lily," Marcus interrupted, gently, "let's not overwhelm Eleanor on her first day here." "It's all right," Eleanor assured him, though he could see the fatigue beginning to show in her eyes. "It's nice to have something to look forward to." James appeared silently at Marcus's. Elbow, perhaps we should let Miss Harrington rest now. The doctor suggested limited excitement for the first few days. Lily looked disappointed but nodded understandingly. Can Apollo stay with you tonight? He really missed you. Eleanor glanced at Marcus, a question in her eyes. He nodded. Of course, he's your dog after all. Actually, Eleanor said softly, I think he's become a bit of both of ours, hasn't he? The simple acknowledgement of their shared connection to Apollo hung in the air between them, carrying implications neither was quite ready to articulate. May blossomed into June, and with it came a transformation in Eleanor's health and in the unexpected bonds forming between the adjacent households. What had begun as a simple arrangement for Apollo's care had evolved into something neither Marcus nor Eleanor could have predicted. The newly installed gate in the fence between their properties became a well-worn path. Apollo trotted happily between his two homes, spending mornings with Eleanor as she gradually increased her physical therapy regimen and afternoons with Lily after school. Evenings often found all four of them together, sometimes at Eleanor's for take-out dinners from Pine Grove's limited but surprisingly good selection of restaurants, sometimes at the Bennett's for Marcus's improving culinary efforts. You've been practicing, Eleanor observed one evening as they sat on her back patio, the remains of Marcus's homemade paella on the table between them. Lily and Apollo were playing fetch in the yard, their laughter and barks blending in the early summer twilight. YouTube. Cooking tutorials, Marcus admitted with a sheepish grin. Lily's been suggesting I expand my repertoire beyond the 5 dishes I know how to make. Well, it's working. Eleanor took another sip of her wine, something she'd only recently been cleared to enjoy by her doctors. This is delicious. Marcus studied her in the fading light. The bruises had long since healed, and some of the weight she'd lost during her hospitalization had returned to her frame. She looked healthy, relaxed in a way he never would have associated with the Eleanor Harrington he'd first met. How was your call with the board today? He asked, knowing she'd been dreading the quarterly review. Eleanor sighed, setting down her glass. Tense. Whitmore is pushing for my return to Manhattan. The 3-month arrangement I negotiated ends in 2 weeks, and he's making noise about optics and shareholder confidence. And what do you want? The question hung between them, weighted with more than just professional considerations. Eleanor's gaze drifted to Lily and Apollo, her expression softening. I've been asking myself that same question every day, she admitted. The Eleanor I was 6 months ago would already be packed and planning her return to the penthouse. And the Eleanor you are now? She met his eyes, a vulnerability there that she rarely showed. She's discovering that the life she built might not be the one she actually wants to live. Before Marcus could respond, Lily came bounding up the patio steps, Apollo at her heels. Dad! Can Eleanor come to me championship game on Saturday, please? The whole team wants to meet her. Marcus glanced at Eleanor, surprised. You've been talking about Eleanor to your team? Lily rolled her eyes with preteen exasperation. Duh, Dad. She's been helping me with my pitching technique all month. Coach says my fastball is way better now. You have? Marcus turned to Eleanor, who shrugged with uncharacteristic modesty. I played softball in college, she explained. It was the one extracurricular my parents couldn't argue with, too all-American to object to. Princeton varsity, Lily announced proudly. She still has all these cool exercises for improving accuracy. Marcus shook his head, smiling. How did I not know this? There's a lot about me you don't know yet, Eleanor replied, a hint of playfulness in her voice that sent a warm current through him. So can she come? Lily persisted. It's the first championship Pine Grove Middle School has made it to in forever. If Eleanor feels up to it. I'll be there, Eleanor interrupted decisively. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Lily beamed, throwing her arms around Eleanor in an impulsive hug that caused the woman to wince slightly, her ribs still tender, but return the embrace nonetheless. Marcus watched the interaction with a mixture of joy and concern. Lily was growing attached to Eleanor, just as she had to Apollo. When the time came for them to leave, later, after walking Lily home for bedtime, Marcus returned to find Eleanor still on the patio, wrapped in a light blanket, despite the mild evening. Apollo lay at her feet, ever the faithful companion. "Lily adores you," Marcus said, settling back into his chair. "The feeling is mutual," Eleanor replied softly. "She's extraordinary, Marcus. You've done an amazing job raising her. I can't take all the credit. Caroline was—" He paused, realizing he rarely spoke of his late wife anymore. "She laid a solid foundation. I'm just trying not to mess it up." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "James found out about the scholarship." Marcus tensed. "What scholarship?" "The anonymous donation to Pine Grove Academy that mysteriously covers Lily's tuition through high school." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "Made the day after I was discharged from the hospital." "Eleanor, before you object," she continued calmly, "it wasn't charity. It was an investment in exceptional talent. The school's science program is one of the best in the state, and Lily deserves access to it regardless of financial circumstances." Marcus exhaled slowly. "You should have told me." "Would you have accepted it if I had?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The truth was, he'd been relieved when the school had contacted him about the anonymous donor who had created a new STEM scholarship that Lily's academic record had qualified her for. The additional tuition assistance had removed a significant burden from his shoulders. "Thank you," he finally said, "but no more secret help, okay? I need to maintain some illusion of adult pride here." Eleanor smiled. "Deal." She hesitated, then added, "Speaking of adult conversations, there's something else we should discuss." "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just important." Eleanor straightened in her chair. "My doctors have cleared me for normal activities. I'm essentially recovered, Marcus." The implications hung in the air between them. "So, you're heading back to Manhattan," he concluded, his chest tightening at the thought. "That's what I need to decide," she replied. "The board expects me back. James has maintained the penthouse. Everything is waiting for me to slot back into my old life. But I'm not sure that's what I want anymore." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "These past 2 months in Pine Grove have been the most real experience I've had since my parents died. Maybe even before that." Marcus watched her carefully. "What are you saying, Eleanor?" "I'm saying I'm considering options I never thought possible. What if I based myself here instead of Manhattan? What if I restructured my role at Harrington to focus more on the foundation? What if I created a life that includes baseball games and movie nights and—" She stopped, catching herself. "And?" Marcus prompted gently. Eleanor met his gaze, vulnerability and determination mingling in her eyes. "And people who see me as Eleanor, not Asa Harrington. The weight of everything unspoken between them. The growing connection, the shared meals, the casual touches that had become less casual, the late-night conversations, seemed to crystallize in that moment. People like Lily." Marcus said softly. "And me." "Yes." No elaborate explanation, just the simple truth. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "And Apollo, of course." "Of course." A smile tugged at her lips. "It always comes back to the dog, doesn't it?" "The dog that brought you into our lives," Marcus agreed, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "So, what happens now?" Before Eleanor could answer, her phone rang with the specific tone she'd assigned to James. She frowned, checking the screen. "James never calls this late unless it's important," she answered, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she listened. "When? How many?" A pause. "Yes, I understand. Lock it down. I'll call Diane." When she hung up, the relaxed Eleanor of moments before had vanished, replaced by the CEO Marcus had glimpsed in their early interactions. "What is it?" he asked. There's been a security breach at Harrington Industries. Someone's trying to access restricted server data. She was already. Rising, wincing slightly at the too quick movement. I need to go to Manhattan. Tonight. Tonight? Eleanor, it's almost 10. This can't wait until morning. She was moving with purpose now, Apollo trailing after her with concern. James is sending the car. It should be here in 20 minutes. Marcus followed her inside, watching as she transformed before his eyes. Phone to her ear as she issued rapid instructions to someone named Diane, pulling a laptop from a drawer, fingers flying across keys as she accessed information. Is there anything I can do? He asked, feeling suddenly superfluous. She paused, glancing up at him. Can you look after Apollo? I don't know how long I'll be gone. Of course, he agreed immediately. But Eleanor, you're still recovering. Should you really be rushing to Manhattan in the middle of the night? I don't have a choice, she replied, her voice clipped. This is my company, my responsibility. As she disappeared into the bedroom to change, Marcus stood in her living room, Apollo pressed against his leg. The domesticity they'd been cultivating these past weeks suddenly felt fragile, threatened by the intrusion of Eleanor's other life, the one where she commanded an empire and answered to shareholders, not the one where she helped at 12-year-old. With her pitching technique, when Eleanor re-emerged, she had transformed completely. Tailored black pants, silk blouse, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, subtle makeup concealing any remaining hints of her ordeal. She looked every inch the billionaire CEO, and for the first time in weeks, Marcus felt the vast gulf between their worlds. I'll call you when I know more, she promised, gathering her laptop and phone. This may be nothing, but you have to check, he finished for her. I understand. She paused at the door, turning back to look at him. For a moment, the corporate mask slipped, and he saw his Eleanor again, the woman who had been sitting on the patio with him just 30 minutes, earlier contemplating a different future. Marcus, about what we were discussing. It can wait, he assured her. Handle your crisis first. She nodded, clearly torn. Apollo, be good for Marcus and Lily. The dog whined softly, sensing the disruption to their carefully constructed routine. Eleanor knelt briefly to stroke his head. I'll be back soon, sweet boy. As a sleek black car pulled into the driveway, Marcus walked her out, Apollo at their heels. James emerged from the vehicle, nodding respectfully to Marcus as he opened the door for Eleanor. Miss Harrington, the helicopter is standing by at the regional airport. Thank you, James. She turned to Marcus one last time. I'll call tomorrow. Then she was gone, the car disappearing into the night, leaving Marcus and Apollo standing in the driveway of a house that suddenly felt emptier than it should. Come on, buddy, Marcus said finally. Let's go home. As they walked through the gate in the fence that had connected their lives, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The bubble they'd been living in had burst, reality intruding on the idyllic life they'd been building. The question now was whether what they'd created was strong enough to withstand the pull of Eleanor's other world, and whether she would choose to return to the life she'd begun to build. In Pine Grove, 3 days passed with only brief formal texts from Eleanor. No calls, no video chats, none of the warm communication that had become their norm. Each message was essentially the same. Still handling the situation, everything under control, will update when possible. On the fourth morning, Marcus was in his driveway, preparing to leave for work when a familiar black SUV pulled up. His heart leaped, then sank as only James emerged. Mr. Bennett, James greeted him with a nod. I've come to collect some of Ms. Harrington's personal items. She's not coming back? Marcus asked, the question escaping before he could temper it. James's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing genuine sympathy. The situation at Harrington Industries has escalated. There was indeed a security breach, apparently an inside job coordinated with a rival company. Ms. Harrington is personally overseeing the investigation. That doesn't answer my question, James. The assistant sighed. She asked me to bring Apollo to Manhattan. She misses him. Just Apollo? Marcus couldn't keep the hurt from his voice. Mr. Bennett. James hesitated, choosing his words carefully. In the years I've worked for Ms. Harrington, I've never seen her as content as she was here with you and Lily. But you must understand, Harrington Industries employs thousands of people. Their livelihoods depend on her leadership, especially in crisis. Before Marcus could respond, Apollo bounded across the lawn from where he'd been playing with Lily, greeting James with enthusiastic familiarity. "Hey, buddy," James said, kneeling, to scratch the dog's ears. "Ready for a trip?" "She could have called," Marcus said quietly. "Explained in person." James straightened. "She was concerned that hearing your voice might make her decision more difficult." The admission hung in the air between them. Lily approached cautiously, sensing the tension. "Is Eleanor okay?" "She's fine, Miss Bennett," James assured her. "Just very busy with work. She's asked me to bring Apollo to her in New York for a little while." Lily's face fell. "But she didn't even say goodbye." "Sometimes adults make complicated choices," Marcus said, putting his arm around his daughter's shoulders. James cleared his throat. "I should mention that Ms. Harrington asked me to extend her apologies for missing your championship. Game tomorrow?" She had intended to be there. Lily nodded, her disappointment evident but controlled. She knelt to give Apollo a fierce hug. "Bye, Apollo. Be a good boy in the city." As James loaded Apollo's things into the SUV, Marcus stood watching, a hollow feeling spreading in his chest. Everything was happening too quickly, the careful connections of the past months severing without ceremony. "James," he called as the assistant opened the car door for Apollo. "Tell her—" He trailed off, unsure what message could possibly encompass everything he was feeling. "Tell her we understand," Lily finished for him, slipping her hand into her father's. "And Apollo knows where to find us if he ever gets lost again." James smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually formal features. "I'll tell her exactly that, Miss Bennett." As the black SUV pulled away, carrying Apollo back to the world of Manhattan penthouses and corporate boardrooms, Marcus squeezed his daughter's hand. "You okay, Lil?" She looked up at him, wisdom beyond her years in her eyes. "Are you?" "I will be," he promised, wishing he felt as certain as he sounded. "We both will." What neither of them knew was that Eleanor Harrington was at that moment making the most important presentation of her career, one that would determine not just the future of her company, but the shape of her own life. And their names were on the first slide. The Pine Grove Middle School Championship game was in its final inning, tension thick in the summer air. Lily Bennett stood on the pitcher's mound, shoulders squared, channeling every technique Eleanor had taught her. The score wasted, bases loaded, 2 outs. One more strike and they'd force extra innings. Marcus sat among the parents trying to focus solely on his daughter's moment, while ignoring the hollow feeling that had persisted since Apollo and Eleanor had disappeared from their lives 5 days earlier. He hadn't realized how quickly he'd grown accustomed to their presence, how much he'd begun to count on Eleanor's smile across the dinner table, Apollo's warm weight against his leg in the evening. Lily wound up, executing the fastball delivery that Eleanor had helped perfect. The batter swung and missed. The crowd erupted as the Pine Grove team rushed the field, surrounding Lily in a celebratory huddle. Marcus was on his feet, applauding wildly, when a familiar bark cut through the cheers. He turned to see Apollo bounding across the bleachers, weaving expertly between spectators, a blue bandana around his neck, emblazoned with "Go Lily." Behind him, walking at a more measured pace, came Eleanor. She looked different from both versions. He had come to know neither the casual neighbor in jeans nor the polished CEO. Today, she wore a simple sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders, sunglasses perched on her head. She looked rested, relaxed, and absolutely certain. "Did I miss the whole game?" she asked as she reached him, slightly breathless. Marcus stared at her, 1,000 questions jamming in his throat. "What are you doing here? You thought I'd chosen Manhattan over Pine Grove," she finished for him. "Over you and Lily." Before he could respond, Lily spotted them from the field and came running, still clutching her glove. "Eleanor! Apollo! You came!" She threw herself into Eleanor's arms, then dropped to her knees to embrace the excited dog. "I promised I would," Eleanor said, meeting Marcus's eyes over Lily's head. "I just had to finish something important first." After the team celebrations and obligatory pizza party, the four of them, Marcus, Lily, Eleanor, and Apollo, walked home together through the early summer evening. Apollo trotted ahead with Lily, who was eagerly recounting every pitch of the game. "You're really back," Marcus said quietly, still processing her sudden reappearance. "For how long?" Eleanor stopped walking, turning to face him. "That depends on whether the offer still stands." "What offer?" "The one we were discussing before I was called away, about creating a different kind of life." She took a deep breath. "I resigned as CEO of Harrington Industries this morning." Marcus stared at her. "You what?" "I didn't sell my shares. I still own the company. But I've appointed Janet Chen as the new CEO. She's more than ready." Eleanor's eyes were clear, confident. "I'm transitioning to executive chair of the Harrington Foundation, which will allow me to focus on philanthropy while maintaining oversight of the company." "But your board, Whitmore, was outvoted," she finished with a slight smile. "It turns out nearly dying gives one remarkable clarity about what truly matters. I made a compelling presentation." "And what does matter?" Marcus asked, his heart hammering in his chest. "This," she said simply, gesturing to Apollo and Lily ahead of them, then to the space between herself and Marcus. "The life I found by accident, when my dog got lost, when a kind man with a gentle heart rescued him on a rainy night." Marcus reached for her hand, twining their fingers together. "So you're staying in Pine Grove, if that's still what you want." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "I've purchased the Peterson house. James is arranging for my most important belongings to be moved from Manhattan. I hoped it might be a good place to start over, to build something real." The full significance of her decision washed over Marcus. Eleanor Harrington had walked away from the center of her power, from the world she'd known all her life, to choose a future in his small town, in the house next door to his. "Eleanor," he said softly, "are you sure about this?" Instead of answering with words, she leaned forward and kissed him. Their first kiss, sweet and certain and full of promise. When they parted, Apollo was sitting at their feet, looking up with what could only be described as canine satisfaction. "I believe Apollo approves," Eleanor laughed. Ahead of them, Lily had turned to witness the moment, her face breaking into a luminous smile. "Finally," she called out, "can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Marcus pulled Eleanor close, savoring the feeling of rightness, of completion. "Ice cream sounds perfect," he called back. "We have a lot to celebrate." As they continued their walk home, all four of them together, Marcus marveled at the journey that had brought them here. A stray dog in a storm, a chance encounter between two different worlds. And now, the beginning of a new chapter none of them could have imagined. That night, as Apollo settled at the foot of the bed where both Marcus and Eleanor now lay, Marcus turned to her in the darkness. "You know, when I found Apollo that night, I was just trying to do the right thing. I never imagined." "That's the beauty of kindness," Eleanor murmured, curling against him. "You never know where it might lead." Outside, a gentle summer rain began to fall, pattering against the roof in a soothing rhythm. Not a storm this time, but a sweet, nourishing shower, washing away the past and nurturing the future they would grow together.